So let's say you're burned out by your job. How does your job fit into your life narrative, who you are, why you do the things you do, your sense of self? Do you have this identity that you are this person, and then for 8 hours a day, you go be another person in your job and you sort of have to turn off who you are? Or are there parts of you and your personality and who you are that are honored and embraced in your job? Do you get to use your skills? Do you get to really shine there? And make sure that the thing that is burning you out, that there is a way for you to be you there, and that it's not this instance of you kind of turning yourself off, playing a role, and then turning that role off and going back to your regular self. Make it more cohesive.
Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up.
Howdy, everyone. It's your host, Polly Siegel. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, certified addiction specialist, and master level trained mindfulness practitioner. I own a counseling practice in both Colorado and Illinois, and I specialize in trauma, OCD, and anxiety. If you live in either of those two states, feel free to reach out to me for a consultation and we can begin the therapeutic journey together. Now on to the good shit. Welcome to season 3 of Shit Talkin' Shrinks. Gosh, I'm so excited. I will be featuring experts in the healing space, and we're discussing a variety of mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while creating levity along the way. Get ready to laugh, learn a lot, and change your life for good.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited that this is the first episode that starts season 3. The fact that we were on season 3 of Shit Talkin' Shrinks is fucking cool. And how do you feel? How do you feel being the first guest of season 3?
I don't know if I should be intimidated, excited, both. Feel like it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be good. We have Megan Johnson. She is part of a group practice in California, psychologist specializing in trauma and burnout, has a fabulous Instagram that is the way that I found you, because I was just like loving all the shit you were posting. And I'm like, I need her on our podcast. So today we are getting into burnout, which I think is a hot topic. It's a buzzword. Everyone kind of casually uses it. I'm so burnt out. I'm so burned out. I'm so burned out.
Yeah, it's like a badge of honor we wear now. I'm like, oh, I'm so burned out. Well, I'm more burned out.
Yeah. Tell that badge of honor resonates. Tell me more of like what that means to you.
Yeah, I think, we all have just come off of 3 years of a pandemic that pulled us, regardless of what industry you work in, what your job looks like, what your home life looks like, it pulled us all in many different directions, affected us all deeply in one way or another. And I think a lot of people really felt burnt out in that time, and that's really valid. But then it sort of became like the burnout Olympics of like who was doing the most, who had it hardest, who the pandemic was most difficult for, whose life changed the most. And we kind of live in this world now, at least, in my culture and America and Western society and Los Angeles in particular, of a hustle culture, and everyone has a side hustle and everyone's trying to, make the most money, support their family, be the best at what they're doing, and doing it all in the public eye on display through social media. It's just a recipe for burnout. And I think we all have this tendency now to over-identify with that of like, oh, I'm doing the most. And I'm seeing actually the conversation shift quite a bit to where people are talking more about self-care, and maybe we don't need to do the most, maybe being good enough it's okay, and we don't have to be the best at everything. And I love that. But I do see a lot of folks really, really burnt out and then over-identifying with that burnout.
Yeah, what's so fascinating, this just came to mind. And not to try to get too political, but right, we have a lot of progressive, socially liberal individuals, especially millennials like us. And there's this sort of aversion to capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a bunch of people that are hustling and grinding and trying to make the most money. And I think that's a little ironic, isn't it?
It is. And I think it speaks to the dilemma that we all find ourselves in, where we exist within these systems that are imperfect at best and abusive at worst. And we're trying to make the most of it. We're trying to get our needs met. Um, we're exhausting all of our energy in order to support ourselves and our families while recognizing that the system within which we are doing that is imperfect. And so, on top of being so exhausted from just surviving, then we also have the challenge of changing those systems, speaking out against injustices, fighting back against things that are just not working, and that just leads to further burnout. It's a never-ending cycle.
When I think of it from a human lens, like, of course we want everything and anything. I think the brain is sort of wired to want it all. And as a millennial generation, we are very drawn to instant gratification, and instant gratification comes from grinding and hustling and achieving and performing and making lots of money and having the badge of honor and being able to say, gosh, I'm so busy, I'm so tired, I'm so blank. But what's so fascinating is then there's this like nervous system response to all of this, where the nervous system is like, slow the fuck down. Like, I cannot take in all of this stimuli and maintain this. There's no sustainability in it.
It's not sustainable.
The pressure to just keep going and like being relentless, that's the word that comes to mind, is like, unless you're relentless, then you're being lazy and probably a bunch of other mean adjectives that we might use.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as millennials, we were raised with the mentality of you can have anything you want. You can be anything you want. You can have it all. And I think a lot of us are realizing like, maybe I don't want it all. Maybe I just want this job that pays my bills and my family who isn't, maybe in all of the activities, doing all of the things, but I get a lot of enjoyment from being around them. And maybe I don't need to be at every social engagement on my calendar. Maybe I can just show up to the things I want to. But yeah, we were certainly raised with that mentality of like, do it all. And I think a lot of us, at least of the millennial generation, are coming up against like, well, maybe I don't want to do it all. Maybe doing enough is okay.
Right. Well, and what's so interesting, so I've had a major shift because I am historically a grinder, a hustler, and I always push my limits. Like I from a little girl was trained to be a high achiever, which has benefited me in miraculous ways. Like, I'm very grateful for my work ethic. But as of recently, I've sort of evaluated this state of being constantly exhausted and tapped out, and finally have gotten into the groove of like self-care and slowing down and being very conscientious of my nervous system. And am I in my window of tolerance, or am I in this hypervigilant state, or hypoarousal, whatever trauma state, the body and the nervous system gets into.
Yeah.
But what's so fascinating is when my friends ask me, how are you doing? Because they're used to me being very like buzzy. And now my answers are like, dude, I am good. I feel relaxed. I'm kicking back. And they don't know what to say to that answer. And that's fascinating to me, Megan, right? Like, if I said to them, oh, I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm burnt out, like they have an easy reply to that. But now that my answer is, I'm chilling, like I'm vegging, I'm like awesome right now, there's not the same embrace. And I don't know if maybe you and I can unpack that in that moment. Like, why isn't it celebrated? Why is it like, oh, you're okay?
Yeah. And that's the thing about overworking and hustling, is that it's validated by society. When you're burnt out, when you're at your wit's end, when you're burning the candle at both ends, society goes, yeah, you're doing a good job. Keep doing it, right? Like, that's what the person who stays late at work is the person who gets praised, not the person who uses all their vacation time, right? And so when you like actively counteract that and say, hey, this isn't working for my nervous system, I'm going to do some self-care, I'm going to chill. And then when people ask you, how are you doing? They're like, oh, well, that wasn't the answer I was expecting. And I was even thinking, like, how often do you ask somebody how they're doing? And they don't even really tell you. They just tell you how busy they are. I'm doing this and this and this and this and this, and I didn't sleep well last night. It's like, why is busy like the default?
Yeah. And that's really sad when you say that busy has become the, trophy answer. Whereas oh, I'm actually really taking care of myself. I feel really healthy. I feel calm and regulated. That like that response is like awkward turtle.
I think because people feel maybe almost called out by it. If I'm engaging in self care and taking care of myself, and my mental health is really good, and I'm regulating my nervous system and getting to bed on time and eating nutritious foods and all of that. People go, oh, well, I'm not. So now are you judging me? Like, how did you get to that place?
Right. Well, and I'm so glad you said that because when I'm receiving these responses from friends and I say, I'm doing pretty fucking good. And it's like, oh, that's so great to hear. It's like this very awkward, high pitched, don't know what to do with my hands response. And I'm like, yeah, like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Like, that's sort of my follow up because I feel the awkwardness in the answer. And then it's like crickets.
Yeah, because they wanted to tell you the 20 million things that they're doing to occupy their time and make more money and keep themselves busy. And you're like, actually, where are you pausing and slowing down and taking care of yourself? They're like, haven't thought about that. It's not on my radar.
What is a pause? I have no idea. Well, and it's not even to add to what you're saying, like it's making more money, but it's also like overextending. It's being the best friend that, always jumps up and helps and is at someone's beck and call. It's the person that is staying late at work and really they need to get back to their family and be present. Like I feel like the overextension and the burnout is so prevalent in all areas of life, whether it's burnout as a parent with your children, burnout in your partnership, burnout at work, burnout with friends. Like it's just pervasive. And I guess that leads me to sort of my next question. How would you, as the expert here, define burnout? If someone's like, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. So I think burnout is the state of overwhelm that we experience from chronically being in situations that are beyond our control, that are too much to handle. And I actually have this little formula for burnout that I use with people that I'm working with clinically to help them kind of understand. Because I think, like we were talking about, we all feel burned out to some degree, right? We're all overextended. And so to really define it, I tell people it's all of those situations where you have a really, really low level of control. You don't have much control over the outcome or the circumstances, but you have a high level of responsibility. So I think of that, in regards to our work, right? So we as clinicians, we have really actually very little control over how the people we work with respond, what they do outside of the 1 hour a week that they meet with us. But we are tasked with this huge level of responsibility. Fix their mental health, keep them alive, don't let them slip into another depressive episode, manage their anxiety. And so the stakes are really, really high, but we don't actually have the skills or the resources or the time or the energy or the finances in order to meet those demands. I work with a lot of people in healthcare who really, really experience this of like, healthcare has moved just from taking care of sick people to managing all the ills of society and all the things that the rest of society doesn't want to deal with. And doctors and nurses are like, I don't have the resources to treat chronic mental illness and substance use and homelessness. Like I know how to prescribe antibiotics to fix something, So those are situations where people have a lot of responsibility and very low levels of control. And it's a recipe for burnout.
And I mean, that's such a beautiful definition that I've actually never heard. And so I'm so thankful you just gave that. If I can add to it, I think as clinically in my own practice, burnout, I also see a presentation where there begins to be apathy. Like the connection and the attachment to the things that once were very important start to just become whatever.
Yeah. And it can look like clinical depression. Like sometimes when I see people who are like, doc, I'm depressed. I don't care about anything. I can't get out of bed. I'm not able to engage in, things I used to love. Our minds are going, that sounds like depression. And the more you probe, sometimes it's burnout. Like this symptom presentation can be identical between depression and burnout. And that apathy, like you said, is huge. You just stop caring about the things you were once passionate about.
Right. Well, and not to put you on the spot, but like, how would one decipher between clinical depression and burnout?
Yeah, it's so hard. I would kind of look at the cause. For clinical depression, they tend to come in like these episodes that last, weeks to months. If someone's been feeling this way for years, I might start to think about burnout and like what's modifiable in your life. How are you approaching your day to day tasks? I think one example I can give is from my own life, where at the start of 2020, I was working in a different clinic than where I'm working now. In addition, I had my private practice. Things were going great. I was loving the work I was doing, and all of a sudden, the pandemic hit. And with the pandemic, my clinical caseload radically shifted. I was working in an outpatient homeless clinic. So all of my clients were individuals who were experiencing homelessness, high rates of severe mental illness, substance use, high risk population. And in the pandemic, all of my care for these individuals switched to being virtual care. I was doing phone and video sessions, which is not clinically indicated for high risk folks. And so my work just became so much more demanding and stressful. After about 6 months, I truly thought I was depressed. I was like going to my therapist being like, I can't get out of bed. I can't do my work. I'm historically good at what I do, and I feel really ineffective. A year later, I took a new position, and I swear to you, overnight, my symptoms of depression went away. So sometimes if we can like change the environment and things shift overnight, I think that speaks volumes.
Well, and I think what's so important in that is that if you're trying to decipher between clinical depression or just burnout, is to change up the variables in your life and see if that leads to a symptom reduction or a shift or something that feels material internally. And so I think we're so quick to jump to meds. And again, I'm very for psychiatric medication when clinically appropriate. But I think before jumping to meds, changing those variables and saying, am I noticing anything? Am I feeling more lively? Do I feel more excited and connected to life? Do I find the joy that I once had? But yeah, that apathy is real. And I've had many points in my life where burnout was intense. And it really was because I wore that badge of honor of being the biggest, best hustler that you knew. And I don't want to do it anymore. It's just, I can't do it anymore. And I can tell you that my life is like incredible because of it. Like now that I don't see burnout as like this shiny, alluring thing that I have to wear.
Yeah, it's not a trophy.
Right. And now I look at it as like burnout is like, ew, gross. Like I don't want to want to be that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I went through this whole thing when I was considering switching positions after I started to realize that maybe my full-time job was contributing to my burnout and what I thought was depression, where I felt like, but I should be able to handle this. This is what I've trained to do. I should be able to keep up. Why is this affecting me so much? And it was through my own therapy, and God bless my therapist, who helped me realize like, no, there was no class in graduate school on how to counsel high risk people through a global pandemic that are not sitting in your office that you can't meet with face to face. There is no way that we had the skills or the resources to manage this. And yet you are tasked with it and you are expecting yourself to be able to handle it. By the way, we were having a mental health crisis at the same time as we were having a pandemic. So caseloads just went through the roof. I was seeing way more people than I was used to seeing, who are way sicker than I was used to seeing. But yeah, absolutely. We think we should be able to do things. It's like, maybe not. Maybe that is outside of the realm of possibility.
Right. And as you say that, what comes up for me is, what if we started to honor this mindset of, I'm not going to be good at that. I won't be able to handle that. That is outside of my grip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, what if we just kind of shifted, instead of being like, oh, no worries, I got it, I can do it, it's fine, I'm capable, I'm skilled, blah. Like if we went into like, actually, like, I don't think that's within my like skill set. and like feeling okay with that and embracing it and honoring it to be like, that's okay that I can't see 30 clients in a week. That's okay.
Right. And that doesn't make me a bad therapist. I'm not a bad psychologist. I haven't failed. That's just my limit. And in order to be a good psychologist, I have to honor my limits and, not run myself into the ground.
Right. And I guess for, we have a lot of non-clinical listeners, like it's okay to have limitations as a parent. It's okay to have boundaries at work. It's okay to work the amount that you're getting paid for, right? We get paid for a 40-hour week. And then some people have the luxury of overtime. Most people don't. And that's what you're getting paid for. So that's what you should fucking do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But there's this mindset, right? Of like, but no, I have to do more.
Yeah. And then I started hearing it called quiet quitting if you're only working a 40-hour week when that's all you're contracted for. And I'm like, how is that quiet quitting? That's called honoring a contract. What?
Quiet quitting? I've never heard of this.
Have you heard this term? Yes. It's this term that I just became familiar with where, of course, it's used to like be pejorative against millennials of, oh, millennials aren't working overtime. They're only showing up, for the time if your contract says you work from 8 to 5, they're signing out of their computer at 5 and I can't get a hold of them after 5. Yeah. Cause that's all I'm being paid for. I'm not being paid to be on call. And it's been termed quiet quitting that, oh, I'm just quiet quitting my job. And it's like, no, that's called having boundaries. And there are jobs in this world where you do have to be on call, right? That's not most of our jobs. That's not most of the things that people do. Where, hey, it's really okay if you stop working at 5 and pick it back up at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Really, the world's going to keep spinning and everyone's going to be just fine if you go home and have dinner and exercise and be with your family and get a good night's sleep, I promise. But that's been really frowned upon in corporate America and called, oh, you're quiet quitting. No, you're having boundaries.
You know what that is, though? That is very, in my mind, strategic propaganda.
Completely.
Like, think of that from the corporate business lens. That is strategic propaganda that if I can create guilt and shame, then that might be the motivation to overwork yourself or extend past what you signed at the dotted line, right? I mean, that's I'm not supporting it. I think that term is bullshit, but I got to give it to corporate America. Like, nice work, man.
Nice reframe.
Yeah, nice reframe. You really fucked us good.
Real good, right? It's terrible. It's terrible out there.
We continue to move through this conversation. Like, how, if you could give, just based on your clinical work, what are the typical burnout scenarios in different departments of life? So if we think about parenting or work or friendships, I want listeners to kind of have clues to what they might want to be looking out for.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing in all of those departments is, do you dread it? Is it hard for you to get out of bed in the morning and engage? So if you're a parent, are you like, oh my gosh, I have to be with my kid all day? And like, listen, I became a parent last year. I get it. Sometimes being with your kid is really, really hard. But if that's how it is day after day after day, and you used to enjoy it, maybe ask yourself, are we doing too many activities? Am I expecting too much? Same with work. Am I dreading getting out of bed and going to work? Or do I have the mindset of, okay, I have to be there from 8 to 5. I can do it. And afterwards, I'm going to engage in some self-care. I'm going to redirect my mind and my energy elsewhere. So I would say the first thing is to kind of check in with yourself on that dread. Is that dread there? Does it feel like I cannot do this another day? Are you counting down the days to retirement? Are you counting down the hours until bedtime or the days until your kid turns 18 and leaves the house or whatever? Same with friendships. Are you dreading showing up to social engagements because I'm going to have to, carry the emotional load here, answer all of these questions or whatever it might be? How are you engaging with your friends? Are you kind of taking on too much, or is it giving you more than you're giving it?
Right. And I would also say is you need to look at previous data points, because sometimes people will get into a job that it doesn't matter whether they're burnt out or not. They just don't like the fucking job. Or they get into a friendship and it's not a fruitful, reciprocal, yummy friendship. So I think what's important is to really look historically. Did I once really enjoy my job? Did I once really enjoy this friend or this friend group? And now am I seeing a contrast in which, well, I'm burnt, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, it's dreadful, I'm overwhelmed, I'm drained. And I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to take a quick pause to talk about our sponsor, a company called BetterHelp. It's an online therapy platform where all the therapists are licensed and accredited professionals. It's affordable, you pay a low flat fee for therapy with your therapist, and it's convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace, and you can communicate with your therapist as much as you want and whenever you feel is needed. And more importantly, it's effective. Thousands of people have benefited from therapy using BetterHelp, and we're really grateful to offer all of our listeners 10% off your first month. So if you're interested in receiving therapy ASAP, click the link in our show notes and you can get started. And you get to save money.
We're all about tangible tools. So I know a lot of people can identify I'm burnt out. They know they need to make a change, but they don't even understand the first step in maybe combating hustle culture or combating the badge of honor of burnout. And so I want to take the next 10 minutes to really dive into tools.
Yeah, I love talking about this. This is my favorite part of the burnout conversation. First and foremost, as a therapist, the thing that I would recommend, and this is something I recommend for everybody, is creating a cohesive life narrative. So let's say you're burned out by your job. How does your job fit into your life narrative, who you are, why you do the things you do, your sense of self? Do you have this identity that you are this person, and then for 8 hours a day, you go be another person in your job and you sort of have to turn off who you are? Or are there parts of you and your personality and who you are that are honored and embraced in your job? Do you get to use your skills? Do you get to really shine there? And make sure that the thing that is burning you out, that there is a way for you to be you there, and that it's not this instance of you kind of turning yourself off, playing a role, and then turning that role off and going back to your regular self. Make it more cohesive to the best of your ability, right? That is something that's in your control, which brings me to my next skill or tip, which is always go back to what is in your control. And for a lot of us in our jobs, we're going to say absolutely nothing's in control. My boss puts things on my desk and says, do them. Yes, there's going to be a lot that is outside of your control, but there is always, always, always at least some aspect of something that's in your control. Maybe it's how you show up. Maybe it's, the clothes you put on to go to work and whether you feel good in them or not, the foods and drinks you have throughout the day, the boundaries you set, the music you listen to while you're working, the way you keep your desk. There's so much that is still within our control. And I literally encourage people to get out a piece of paper, put a line down the middle, write aspects of the situation that are in your control and aspects of the situation that are outside of your control. And literally give zero energy to those things that are outside of your control. Don't try to change them. Work on accepting them. It's how it is. And if you're going to channel your energy anywhere, put it towards those things that are inside of your control.
That's such a brilliant idea, because the visual cue is important. When it's all swirling in your head, it's very hard to tease apart control versus lack of control. And so when it's on that piece of paper and you can see it very clearly, that creates more of like the visceral, whoa, I know what I can do and I know what I can't. But here's the other thing that a lot of people will convince themselves of, that something isn't in their control when in fact it is in their control. And I think that piece is where you need to look inward and really decipher what narrative or storytelling is happening. Because when you say like, I can't tell my boss I'm leaving at 5, that's a story, right? Like, of course you can, right? You're not handcuffed to your desk. You don't have a gun to your head. Like, there's not like, I guess I just wanted to highlight that piece, that like really look at your storytelling and see and poke holes in it.
Get curious about it. Well, why can't you tell your boss that? Well, there will be consequences. Well, what are those consequences? Maybe they're good consequences. Maybe you'll stop getting assigned so much work if they know you're leaving at 5, right?
Or I don't want him or her or them to become upset.
Well, why are you managing their emotions? That's not your job.
Okay, I cut off your flow. Keep going, Megan girl.
Oh, it was going back to what we were talking about earlier, which is sometimes you need to change up the environment. If you have tried all of these things and it is just not working, you are dreading life, you are slipping into a clinical depression, maybe something does need to be changed up. Maybe you can negotiate with your employer a couple days a week, work from home or modified schedule. I've done that. I work a really funky schedule where I start work very, very early in the morning, approved by my employer, because when I come in early in the morning, there's nobody else here to bother me and I can just get work done. And then I get off early or earlier than most people, and I get to spend time with my kiddo. And that works for me. So maybe you need to do something like that. Again, something in your control. If you've tried all of these things and it's not working, maybe you need to shift the environment totally. Maybe that is a new job or moving or new position. The other thing I'll add is the self-care piece. I'm really, really big on self-care. I also think the way that we talk about self-care can often be very toxic. A lot of times people say self-care is in do more, go to a yoga class, set aside time to meditate, meal prep, all of these elaborate meals, do these long workouts, go for a 2-hour walk. Okay, when I'm already burnt out, adding those things to my to-do list is like the opposite of what I need, right? And so I want to really encourage people to engage in self-care in a way that is sustainable and healthy and doesn't add more to their to-do list. So look at things you're already doing and ask, how can I make this luxurious? How can I make this a treat for myself? So you're already taking a shower in the morning. What can you do to kind of amplify that shower? Can you get some essential oils? Can you blast some music? Can you take 5 minutes just to be alone with your thoughts in the shower? A big one that I see with a lot of people is going to the bathroom. You bring your phone to the bathroom, don't you? Just leave your phone. Just leave your phone. Have 2 or 3 minutes to just breathe and be alone with your thoughts. You don't necessarily need to add more to your plate, but rethink some of those things that you're already doing and how you can make them more oriented toward self-care.
Right. Yeah. I never thought about the pressure we put on ourselves for self-care. Like you saying that, I'm like, holy shit. I think I do that.
I mean, we all do, right?
You know, where I'm like, I need to have the perfect meditation. Then I need to go for the most beautiful walk. And then I need to make sure to pick the best tomatoes at the store. You know, like there's like this pressure for like perfection in it.
Oh my gosh. And I can't work out unless I have the matching workout set. Yeah. It's like, no, we're making it so much more than it needs to be. Honestly, it doesn't have to be Pinterest worthy.
Right. And I think the other thing with burnout, and I think burnout comes in, just to simplify it for listeners, in 2 forms. We're either in that keyed up, agitated, our system's really revved, we're anxious, we're stressed, we're panicky. That's that hyper arousal. Or it can go into the hypo arousal where we feel deadened, we feel tired, we're in autopilot, we're just sort of numb, we're going through the motions. And so I think another piece of burnout is really checking your nervous system and like doing things that get you back into that regulated or window of tolerance, because that's your feel good state. That's the area where we feel safe and grounded and anchored. And it's very hard to be burned out when you feel grounded and anchored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is where knowing your trauma responses and how you engage with the world can be so helpful. And this is my plug for going to therapy, because obviously I'm a therapist. I think it's the best thing ever. And if you're burned out, try going to therapy. Sometimes, I mean, this is what helped me. I went to therapy and my therapist looked me dead in the eye and had some very different interpretations of what was going on that helped me to realize maybe I wasn't depressed and maybe I was burned out. And sometimes you need an outside person to just take a look at the situation and help you think differently about it and help you to understand how you interact with the world around you, what your proclivities are, whether you kind of slip into an anxious, worried space or a depressed, disengaged space, and what your trauma responses are and how you're engaging with the really hard things in your life.
Absolutely. And I think another big systemic change that can be a tangible tool is start asking friends, what are you doing to take care of yourself? When you hear that, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm so busy, like stop praising that behavior with your friends. Like start to challenge that badge of honor, because we as humans survive and thrive in community. And if our community is not promoting change in a way that's meaningful, then we're going to keep falling back into the groove and the pattern. So like I've started to do this, like when my friends take on that presentation, I'm like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? How are you slowing down? What can I do to support you? What needs are not being met that you can tend to? Like I'm asking those questions versus being like, fuck yeah, you're busy. Awesome. Like stop saying that shit to your friends.
Yes, absolutely. I have a friend who will always say, when she checks in, is like, how are you doing? And if I'm like, oh God, I'm tired, or oh, I have this going on, or I'm stressed about this, her response is always, well, what helps? What makes it better? And I'm like, thank you for that. Like, you don't just like join me and go, oh yeah, I'm so exhausted too. And it's not like, well, I slept 6 hours last night. Well, I only got 5. She's like, no, what helps? What do you need taken off your plate so you can get to bed at a reasonable hour tonight? And I'm like, you are such a breath of fresh air. The world needs more of that. So I love that you're doing that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess, approaching it with kindness, we don't want to, what's the right word? Penalize someone who's kind of stuck in the grind culture, but doing it in a kind, loving way is always the words are losing me. It's always the best policy. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because the last thing somebody needs if they're in kind of a burnt out, defeated state is for a friend or a loved one to come alongside of them and start reprimanding them. And I don't think that's what we're advocating for. But asking those questions that can help shift a mindset, help people to look elsewhere and create more peace and calm in their life.
Yeah. And I think the last tip is learning to sit in the discomfort, that when you challenge this system, which again promotes you to be drained and tapped out, that's the badge of honor. When you start to challenge it, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to have thoughts of, I'm lazy, I'm not doing enough. You're going to have the negative critique voice that's on blast. And it's being really good at knowing that it's a temporary state and it takes the brain some time to rewire and to recondition itself to be a different program as it navigates forward. But it's going to be uncomfortable, and that you'll get through it. And at this point in my life, I'm loving being healthy. Like I love being it. It's awesome.
I totally agree. And yeah, what you're speaking to is that idea that like we all operate within these systems, and the American system demands hustle, burnout. That's just the way the system is wired. And when you actively work against that, the system is going to fight back, and that's uncomfortable. And so you need to be prepared for that and be okay with the discomfort. But eventually the system will recalibrate. When your boss realizes that he or she is only going to get 8 hours of work out of you a day, they're going to stop giving you 10, 11, 12 hours of work. It's going to be icky at first. It's not going to feel good, but the system will recalibrate.
Well, on that note, Megan, thank you so much for joining Shit Talking Shrinks. This was a killer episode for the first episode of season 3. So you can find all of Megan's information in the show notes. You'll have access to her clinical practice as well as her social media, which is fire, by the way. That's how I found her. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll catch you later.